Yeah. Can you hear me? Does it sound okay?
Yep.
All right, terrific. My name is John Richards. I'm an associate professor here at BYU. Let me tell you a little bit about how I arrived to be an associate professor. So, I'm an alumni of BYU here. I graduated in chemistry. I was pre-med and thought I wanted to be a doctor. Senior year, changed my mind, and I went into business instead. Got into the publishing business and printed print yellow pages. And print yellow pages is a great industry. It is extremely profitable. Matter of fact, even to this day, the print yellow pages business is somewhere between 25 to 50% net profits. After everything is said and done, that's how profitable that business is. And if you know anything about business, that's extremely exciting. As boring as yellow pages might sound, it's not boring from that perspective. And the yellow pages, though, right now is a little bit under attack from new technologies. And we're going to talk about some of those concepts today. But in my career, I was going along fine publishing print yellow pages. And then in 1994... I'm not sure, that might be before some of you were born, maybe not, I'm not sure. I was the first to launch yellow pages on the internet coming from an actual print product. And so that was an interesting and exciting time in the early days of the internet. Matter of fact, I had so much attention from it when I was doing it kind of as an experiment that I took it back offline and made a real business out of it and had the idea of creating a consortium of all the people that do print yellow pages going through one single website or service. And launched that. By 1996, I had about 10 companies that wanted to buy that enterprise even though it had no revenue. And myself and my partners that did this, we decided to ultimately sell to a company that was actually formed by a few individuals leaving Microsoft at the time. And they were forming a company to do white pages. We were the company that had figured out yellow pages. So we came together and formed the company that ultimately became known as InfoSpace. And I don't know if you've heard of InfoSpace, but to this day, InfoSpace is about the 5th most trafficked network of sites on the internet and is still an existing successful company. I left there in 2001. And took some time off. It was quite an interesting and exciting ride. I went through the entire .com up and down cycle. If you know anything about that era, a lot of internet companies were very successful and then they crashed very hard. Certainly InfoSpace went through that time frame. When I was in this time of getting back to know my family a little bit better and spending time with my wife and children, BYU called up and said, if you're not doing anything, how would you like to teach? And so I accepted that invitation, and for one semester we gave it an experiment to see if it would work out. I flew down from Seattle where I was living on Tuesday morning, taught a 3-hour class, and flew back Tuesday night. Ended up that I liked it, and they offered me a full-time position, and I came down here to be the managing director of the eBusiness Center and an associate director of the Entrepreneurship Center, and teach some courses in entrepreneurship and consulting and eBusiness. And so that's what I do. I'm also active as an angel investor in companies, mostly tech companies. That an angel investor is somebody who helps give money to new companies so that they can get started. And I'm a member of an organized angel group called Utah Angels, which is the oldest and most prevalent angel investing group in the state of Utah. It's been around for over 10 years and has invested lots of money in lots of different companies. Some have been successful and some have not. That's how it goes in the investing world. So that's a little bit about myself. I have 4 children, and we live here in Provo, Utah, and thoroughly enjoy our association with BYU. So with that, let's get on to the subject of tech entrepreneurship and tell you what we're going to do today. Today we are going to go through and look at, is it important to educate yourself if you want to be a tech entrepreneur? Do you need advanced education? We hear all these stories of, high school students or college dropouts that start companies and form tremendously successful high-tech ventures. And how important is it to actually get your education in order to go down this path. So let's take a look at some statistics, and then we're going to go into some more of the exciting aspects of tech entrepreneurship. So first of all, let's define a little bit what is tech entrepreneurship. These are some of the vertical markets that really comprise what we would call tech or technology entrepreneurship. And you may be aware that the Center for Entrepreneurship here at BYU, along with the Center for eBusiness, they are merging together to form the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. The high-tech then aspect here, or looking at this, are these areas. I have software in red because that's where I spend most of my time and most of my interest lies, is in the area of software, probably because it's low cost to get into and very high rewards if you're successful. Now, there's other areas such as semiconductors, computers, hardware meaning, communications, biosciences, defense, environmental, and innovation and manufacturing. Those are aspects of technology, but we're really going to focus most of your lectures in the semester that you're going to be hearing from are going to be focused more in the area of software in terms of what they've done and the companies they've built. Software can be broken down into many subcategories, such as the types of software, which would be applications, systems, and tools, or you might break it down by whether the distribution mechanism or the platform, such as desktop software, which is software that needs to be loaded onto a computer and run from the computer, as opposed to web-based or internet software, which is run through the browser. And then, of course, this transition from desktop to software as a service has transformed the software industry, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. All right, so that kind of gives you a little background. So let's talk about who are these people that start these companies and that you're going to be hearing from. What are they like? Who are they? Well, amongst U.S.-born tech founders, according to the research, this is who they are in terms of their terminal degree, meaning what is their last degree earned. You can see that most of the entrepreneurs are bachelor's degree holders or master's degree holders. Only 6% are high school diploma or lower, and 10% PhD. So you can see that it is important, or that most of these people have advanced degrees in college. The terminal degrees from U.S. tech-born founders in terms of the fields that they're in, this is interesting. The two leading ones are engineering and business accounting and finance. Now that's also a little bit fascinating to me because the two entrepreneurship classes that I teach, where I teach from soup to nuts, business plan creation, creating and managing new ventures. I really enjoy thoroughly those classes. I teach one in the engineering school. It's called Manufacturing Technology 479. I teach another one in the business accounting and finance called Business Management 479. And these courses, that we focus in those schools because that's where a lot of these entrepreneurs come from. And it's exciting to see that the research is showing that we're concentrating in the right places right now. Of course, you can see some from computer science and law and mathematics and some of the social sciences, but this is where they're prevalent. Some of the other statistics about this is age. High-tech entrepreneurship is actually not that easy. You can mitigate the difficulty, and we're going to talk about things you can do to do that, but it's a tough road. 4 out of 5 companies will fail very quickly, and a lot of it has to do with the age at which the founders are when they start the company. You can see that the most prevalent age is 35 to 44. This is because a lot of the founders in that age group are probably getting frustrated with their employer, have an idea that's been percolating in their head, and they've maybe saved up a little money and think they can go off and start a company. But at the same time, they have responsibilities. They have a family, a spouse with children. They have maybe a white picket fence house with a mortgage. It might not be the best time to start a company, especially if they have the mistaken notion that you can go start a company and make a salary equivalent to what you get paid from your employer. The reality is that when you go start a company, you don't get the same salary. You don't get to make $100,000 a year like your employer might have been paying you from your company. That's not how it works out in the real world. It's a lot different. So A lot of times you have a lot of these people starting at this age and then they give up ultimately because it's not the best time to be a risk-taking entrepreneur. But the lower ages down here, 21 to 25, 55 and over, here when you don't have a lot of responsibilities, you have time in case you make a mistake, you can correct it by getting back on track in a career or starting another company, making up for a mistake if you failed at your first one. Or here where you've got some cushion, where you've got money. Maybe if you've saved $1 million in a 401k plan over your career, you can take time off, start a company, and have that cushion so that you can take that risk. A couple more things about this. The time lag, it's interesting that 13 years after getting an MBA is the average time that an MBA student or MBA diploma holder will start their company in tech. All other master's degrees, 15 years, bachelor's degrees, 17 years, and the PhD surprisingly take 21 years after earning a PhD on average to start a tech company. So some of the training in the MBA courses looks like it helps to get a little bit earlier start in life on forming a tech company. A couple things also that some of the research has shown, and again this research is coming from the Kauffman Foundation, in published work. They found that there's an overrepresentation of top 10 schools and Ivy League schools amongst tech entrepreneurs. This is not meant to discourage those from other universities. It's just showing that there's some of the brightest and smartest people at some of the most prestigious institutions know that tech is a place to focus and to concentrate on. Also, you can see from the Ivy League schools here that just the Ivy League schools have an 8% concentration, though of course they are much less percentage of the total graduating college student population. A few other things. You'll see that amongst all startups, here's the average in terms of sales and average in terms of employment. Employees that they're putting to work, and the startups from an Ivy League founder are higher, but the startups from a high school founder are radically lower. So there is a difference. You need the college education, the background you get here can contribute greatly to you being a stronger entrepreneur. This is why we teach entrepreneurship at the university level, why it's an important field, it's an important course of study, and we can actually improve entrepreneurship with the training you get in the program. And BYU has a leading entrepreneurship program here with its centers and with some of the courses and the instructors. A couple other things. The percentage of the tech founders, how many stayed in the same state when they started their company as the state in which they earned their degree. Utah is not listed on here because it's not in the high or the low section. It's probably falling more in the averages around 45%, but that's kind of an exciting number to see. Certainly those of us that live here in Utah are excited to see bright students start companies or bright alumni start companies and stay here in the state close to the university and create the synergies that come from that. Let's talk a little bit about U.S.-born and immigrant founders. A couple things about immigrant founders. 25.6% of the startups nationwide in high tech come from immigrant founders. 52.3% of those are concentrated in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley thinks that the world revolves around that area, and it looks like in some degree maybe that's true. There's a lot of money there, a lot of capital, and a lot of bright people starting a lot of interesting tech companies, and it's kind of a fascinating space. Highly educated in science, technology, and engineering related disciplines. That's what they're bringing to the table. The majority come to the United States to study at a university, and they decide to stay and start a company. Establish the company on average 13 years after coming to the U.S. and gravitate to technology centers across the country. Let's talk about the technology centers. You're going to be hearing this potentially from speakers. Certainly the number one, the tier one technology center in the United States is Silicon Valley. That's around the Bay Area of San Francisco and San Jose. There's just an overwhelming amount of activity in that market, and it's a real cluster. Number two, a second tier maybe by itself would be Boston and its area. That's a leading tech center. Then you have a third tier composed of a lot of important tech centers like Austin, Texas, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Raleigh-Durham in North Carolina, New York, which is nicknamed Silicon Alley. Seattle is Silicon Forest with Portland. Chicago. Southern California is pretty important too. So these are some of the tech clusters. Surprisingly, Utah County is a tech cluster. I put it more at a fourth tier only because it's so small, relatively speaking. There's about 450,000 people that live in Utah County, but there's a huge amount of entrepreneurial activity. First of all, in fact, Utah County has more startups, not just in tech, but all vertical markets, has more startups per capita than any county in the United States. It also has an enormous amount, relative to its size, tech startups. This comes from a rich history coming from companies like Novell and WordPerfect and what has spun off from there. And the wealth that was created is being put back into starting up new companies. And so a lot of activity is happening here in Utah County. And matter of fact, there's a branding effort trying to be established right now called Silicon Slopes. If you go into Wikipedia and look up Silicon Slopes, it'll define the Wasatch Front or Utah area as Silicon Slopes, trying to brand itself the same way as Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley or Silicon Forest brands itself as a tech center. All right, so let's move on and look at some of the U.S.-born founders, some of the differences. They tend to be well-educated. They're more mobile and are much more older than is commonly believed, however. The average and median age is 39. Which means there's people in their 50s starting tech companies as well as people in their 20s. Matter of fact, there's twice as many in their 50s starting tech companies as people in their 20s. Now, I'm not trying to discourage anyone. Matter of fact, today, by the end of the day, hopefully you're very encouraged to think about starting a tech company. But I want you to know that it's tougher than you think, and you've got to be really well prepared. You've got to combine strong work ethic with education and knowledge to make it work. It doesn't just fall in your lap. If you're depending on good luck and fortune, well, you'll get about the same results as buying a lottery ticket, and I think we'll see that in just a second. I can show you some stats on that. Half of the degrees that are held are in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics, the STEM-related disciplines as they call them. That's a problem because the U.S. is declining in STEM majors. The number of students majoring in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics is dramatically dropping. It's true here even at BYU, and that's going to hurt the United States in the future in terms of its entrepreneurial activity. 1/3 are in business, accounting, and finance. That's holding pretty steady, and it's very important to have business people involved in this. And we spent a lot of time here in this course and in this business college focusing on that. 45% of the startups were established in the same state where founders received education. We already saw that statistic on another slide. Here's some conclusions to all of this. Education provides an advantage in tech entrepreneurship. It's great if you are self-taught programmer. You got a great idea to launch on the web and all that, but you're at a disadvantage if you don't get your degree and get some other disciplines along with your idea and your self-taught knowledge. The average age at which they start is 16 years after they started their work experience after college. The age 20-year-old, the wonder kind, the incredible young guy that starts a company, that is the exception, not the rule. But I will tell you, I know many that fit that category. There's many that drop out of BYU, start a tech company, and do phenomenally well. When I say many, that's a relative statement. I know several, and it can happen, but it is by far the exception, not the rule. The starkest success gap in the research was between the terminal bachelor's degree and the high school diploma. So obviously finishing that bachelor's degree can really help your chances for success or increasing your success as a tech entrepreneur. Some states are more successful than others retaining these entrepreneurs. Near the university, California by far is the first and the best, probably because it has some good climate and some strong attractions for the people that are there. There's a predominance of degree holders, and that suggests that advanced education has become critical. So, tech founders also tend to have good business experience before they launch if they're going to be successful. All right, the bottom line message of all of that, which hopefully didn't bore you too much, is that education is important to tech entrepreneurship. So we're going to get started to get educated even more so now. But let me review the start of your education this last week. Who spoke to you? Dr. Little, right? Remember what he talked about? Who can tell me what he talked about? Raise your hand. So, yeah?
So Moore's law, law of the network law, I don't know if that's the right word, but network effect.
Okay.
And
disruptive technology. That's right. So Moore's law. Who can explain what Moore's law is? Go ahead in the back. You got your hand up first.
Yeah, every year the amount of power processing.
Okay, so the number of transistors is, on a doubles in the space on a chip, on a computer chip is kind of what, but that expresses itself in many ways. In other words, about every 18 months, the power and the speed and the storage capacity are doubling. Matter of fact, even storage capacity is even going up with hard drive space and what they can do to store data. This power has revolutionized society, and Moore's law is very important. It's held steady since about the 60s, more or less. It's true that about every 18 months you see this doubling effect, and it's been amazing. I can remember, and, you know, I left college maybe before most of you were born, but I remember that, first of all, my first computer I ever got for business, not one I had at home, for real business, had 2 floppy drives, a 5 megabyte hard disk, and a monochrome monitor, and it cost $14,000. Okay? Shoot forward a few years, and all of a sudden hard drives starting to get big, and we were getting excited. And we were able to buy a 1 gigabyte hard drive, probably about 10 years later. And the first 1 gigabyte hard drive I bought cost $3,000. And it was a stretch for our company to justify that and what we were going to do with it. But now, when I can go down to Sam's Club or Costco, and I can pick up a 1 or 2 terabyte drive for like $109, or maybe not quite there yet, but online I can, that opens up a whole world of possibilities to get a $600 computer, buy that drive, and what can I do, and how much can I store, and what are the things I can change my life with, and what can businesses do, and it's just the power and the capacity. It's phenomenal, and that law is very important. Moore's law, you're going to hear that term from speakers this semester. What was the second one? Somebody called it the network effect. That's its nickname. What's the law's name? Metcalfe's law, but I call it network effect is the colloquial name for that, and it's the law that's impacted me the most in my career and given me the most success. And who can define what Metcalfe's law is?
The more devices in a network that are available, the more the stronger the network becomes. More or less.
Okay, the more devices. Let's say it a different way. See if we can articulate just a little bit. Good start.
In proportion to the square number of users.
Okay, so the relative value of one network to another is equal to the square of the number of users. That's right. And if you really want to say exactly right, the network the equation is the square of the number of nodes on the network, but you can say users. So, because a node can be a lot of different things. On a computer network, that would be users, right, or potentially computers connected to the network, things like that. So what was the example he might have given of some networks?
Phone network.
Okay, so the telephone network. I personally believe that the telephone network and one other network that exists in this country are greatly responsible for creating the United States as a world leader, as a dominant superpower. And so the ability to have, in 1933, Congress passed the Telecommunications Act that said everybody in the country is going to have a phone. And it's not going to be expensive. It's going to be cheap to have a phone. It's going to be subsidized, and we'll give the companies a monopoly in their area to offer that phone service so they can do it for cheap, so everybody has it, and that's how it worked. It wouldn't have worked. If phones were too expensive, not everybody would have one, and then the value of the network decreases, right? But by the fact that we gave everybody a phone in this country, it exploded the value of the network, and people could talk and communicate and do business without having to fly or wait a week or two for a letter going back and forth. Pretty amazing change. What's another network that really impacted this country and made it powerful? Anybody know? Okay, the Internet's one, but that's a lot later. Let's go back. U.S. was already a superpower by the time the Internet came around.
Let's say railroad.
Railroad's important, but not as important as another type of vehicle. No, not fax. Okay, highway. The highway network. The interstate highway system of the United States is a revolutionary system not a lot of countries have. In the 1950s, the federal government said, we're going to create an interstate highway system of, 5 through 95 and 2 or 10 through 90, 92, and 94 up in the north, and create this grid. Every ramp on and off is like a node on a network, isn't it? And you get on and off this network and move along it and transport data, which are people in cars, trucks, commerce, goods, all these things. The fact that we can get around our country so much, we can communicate so well, is what makes us strong. It's tremendously valuable to have that type of network. And there's other networks. The Internet, of course, is the most explosive network of all time. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in today's lecture. But the Internet is phenomenally powerful. Phenomenally powerful. We haven't even seen the beginning of what it's going to do to us and for us, and maybe to us too sometimes. So, all right, what's the third one? Disruptive technology. Who can explain that? Yep.
Usually a technology that emerges, that when it emerges, people don't see the value in it. Usually consumers aren't really that interested in it. But then with time, it tends to overtake the existing technologies and then becomes...
Right. So what he said is the disruptive technology comes along, and at first it's slow to be adopted, but then the value starts improving, and more consumers start using it until it becomes threatening to the dominant previous technology. And this is very important. If you're really interested to learn about business and these things, there's a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, written by an LDS Harvard business professor, Clayton Christensen. It's a legendary and landmark book, business book, and it explains the application of this principle to many different industries, and you can see how a company that was once great ignored a new technology, let a new startup company start with a new technology and ignored it and said it'll never be a competitor, and it got strong and big and wiped out the original dominant company. And this happens time and time again. The cycle repeats itself, and this book's all about that. It's a fascinating book. All right, very good. So, glad that Dr. Little did his job. He always does a great job, and you're going to see that your speakers will throw out network effect, disruptive technology, and Moore's Law a lot as they give their talks. All right, so I've already said it. Being a tech entrepreneur is not easy. 1 in 6 million high technology business ideas goes to an initial public offering, an IPO. An initial public offering is when the company becomes so successful that it can sell its shares of stock on the open public stock market. All right? That's a dream of a lot of businesses to be able to do that. And so only 1 in 6 million business ideas actually makes it there. That's about the same as buying a lottery ticket. So it's not easy. Less than 1% of business plans that venture capitalists consider get funded. This means that on average, a venture capital firm will see about 1,000 plans a year and only fund 10 of them. So it's hard to get capital and the money to launch these companies. Founder CEOs typically own less than 4% of their high-tech companies after an initial public offering. So you start off owning the whole thing, and by the time you really get the money for all your efforts, you're down to very small ownership in the company. And that's the way that it works. 60% of high-tech companies that are funded by VCs go bankrupt. So even when a VC thinks it's a great idea and gives them a few $1 million to go make their dreams come true, many fail. 60% go bankrupt. Most high-tech companies that succeed in having an IPO take 3 to 5 years to get there. It's not an overnight success. You don't start a company and next year go public. That just doesn't happen. So it takes time. All right. Some of the concerns that investors have when they're looking at entrepreneurs that are starting these tech companies, let me share those real quickly with you. On the financial side, they're looking at the gross margins. They're very interested in what the margins are, your revenue less the cost to produce your product or service. Then they look at the total addressable market. This is a term you may hear from the speakers. It's called TAM, or total addressable market. What's the size of the market? And the way you calculate this out is you take all of the customers in the United States that could possibly buy your service or product and how much they would spend with you in a year's time, so the annual revenue, do that multiplication, and that's the total size of the market. That needs to be a very big number for your idea to be exciting. Matter of fact, if it's not $1 billion or more, it's not exciting. If it's $100 million, it's too small to be exciting to investors to give you the money you need to make the company work. Because they know that you might only get 2%, 4%, 5% of the market, and if you only get 5% of a $50 million market, you're only going to have a $2.5 million revenue company, and that's not going to be enough to get their millions of dollars back that they might have to give you to make it go all the way, obviously. So, in other words, it needs to be a good-sized market. Revenue projections, associated sensitivity analysis. You need to show that you can generate revenue, and what are the key factors in generating that revenue. They're worried about time to profitability. Is this going to take 20 years to get to profitability, or can you do it in 2 years? Need for following capital. How much money does this need? If I give you $1 million and it takes you 2 years to get to the next phase, and you need another $1 million later, are you going to be able to get that? Or can the first $1 million take you to profitability? That's a question. Now, they're also concerned about liquidity. Full liquidity within 3 to 5 years is the goal. They want to see, when they give money to a tech entrepreneur, that in 3 to 5 years, they can get their money back with a good return on investment. And that return on investment they expect is usually 10x. They're taking a risk with these startup companies. They want to see 10 times their investment come back. So if I give you $100,000 for your tech idea and you start your company, within 3, 5 or so years, I'm wanting back $1 million to me so that I have a 10x return on my money. And that's the way that the investors think. Some of their concerns regarding management, they want to know that you've got a good management team, that you're in a good space, that you know how to execute the business plan. It's more important that you can demonstrate that you can execute a high-tech business plan than it is that you have this incredibly great idea. The idea needs to be strong and good, but without the management team to execute it, or the idea and strategy to execute it, it's not very valuable. They like to see domain experience, that you have some knowledge. You know, if you're going to be in a space doing something, and you're going to need C++ programmers to do something in the pet industry and make some great solution for that, they want to know that you've got some experience and knowledge about it. They don't want you just playing around in something you know nothing about. Track record. If you can show that you have a track record, that you have taken money from investors before or built a company before with success, that is very attractive, of course, to the investors. Now, one more thing they're concerned about, the technology itself. They like to see technologies that benefit consumers and bring benefit. And the way we like to say this in entrepreneurship is better, faster, cheaper. So if your idea can make something better, faster, or cheaper, you're on the right path. It's really important. All right? Now, barriers to entry. They don't want it to be easy to copy or easy to duplicate by a company that's bigger with more money and more people. They want something that sets you apart, makes you unique, that you'll have some runway ahead of everybody else to get to the finish line and do a good job. They don't want to see you just start something up and be wiped out by somebody else later. Some barriers to entry can be things like a patent. It can be the fact that you signed up a key player in the industry with a contract that's exclusive, that's 3 years long, and nobody else can have that contract, so you've now created a lot of value for your enterprise. Distribution channel, they want to know that you have a way to sell your product, that there's a way to get it out there, and they're concerned about customer service. Who's ever had a problem with the customer service issue with a tech company before? Anybody in here? If you look, you've had a problem. That's quite a lot of hands going up. I have too. A lot of times we start these tech companies and some of the afterthoughts are, oh, what happens if the average consumer can't understand it? Are we going to have an 800 number for them to call in on? Are they going to email us? Are we going to have live chat? What are we going to do to take care of these customers, make sure they can figure out our system? If you ignore it, you kill your company. But if you haven't planned for it, the expense can wipe out your company. It's a very important issue. All right. So we've reviewed those fundamental concepts. We've looked at some of these issues. Now, we're going to talk about how you can become more attuned as you see these lectures for this semester, as you run across ideas this semester, as you're thinking about, wow, what good ideas would make good tech businesses. And let me give you a little tip. First of all, where do ideas come from? Most of the time, an idea comes from something that's really bothering you in your life. And you're saying, man, why doesn't somebody fix that? Really makes me upset. That's the perfect time for you to be that somebody and come up with a solution to address that pain in the marketplace with a cure. And the cure is going to be your business idea, and you're going to make money from it. That's how great ideas come to fruition in the marketplace. Now, when you have that idea, there are ways to test that idea to see if it's good as a business opportunity or great as a business opportunity, perhaps. So let's look at this a little bit. So there's a lot of ideas out there, but very few of them are actually good. Matter of fact, I think about out of 1 million ideas, there's probably 10 that are truly fundable, great business opportunities that would deserve money from investors. So that means there's tons of ideas flowing out there, but when you really put a disciplined business approach to it, not all of them, matter of fact, very few of them, are worthy of becoming a business. So we have to generate a lot of ideas to come up with the one that's really going to do it. Matter of fact, I personally believe, and this is anecdotal, I don't have the research in front of me, but the average successful tech company that you see out there is not doing today, when it's all successful, what it started off doing. I think on average, they change their business plan entirely about 2 or 3 times before they arrive at the one that they make their grandiose hit on. It's really an interesting story. And I can tell you story after story of companies that it applies to. 2 of the great companies from this county that applies to, such as Novell. Novell didn't strike upon its idea that made its fortune until its 3rd year of business. Omniture's the same way. Took several years to get to the thing that really caught on. Who's heard of Omniture? Okay, most of you have. All right. Here's the way that you filter an idea to tell if it's any good. It's called the 3 M's. The demand for the market. Is their consumer, the one that will consume the product or service, are they demanding this type of product? Is there clamoring in the marketplace for it? What's the market size? We talked about that. Is it a large market? The larger the market, the more attractive it is. What about the margins? When you sell this product to your customer and you pay all your expenses, is it a small 1% margin or is it a big 50% margin? The bigger the margin, the more attractive and the better the idea is. There's more filters you can run this through. We talked about high barriers to entry you want to have. You want a low capital requirement. The lower the capital requirement to start the company, a company that only needs $500,000 versus a company that needs $10 million, that's a better business idea. It's easier to raise $500,000 than it is $10 million. Recurring revenue model. This is meaning that when you're out selling, are you selling once and then have to go back to that same customer the next month to sell and get more money from them? Or when you sign them up, are they signing up and they pay you every month repeating? That's called a recurring revenue model, like Netflix is a good example of that. These are companies that score high in all of these areas, and they came from BYU students, and I personally invested in them. What are the best internet ideas and models of all time? What have you seen? What are some of them? Call some of their names out. Amazon. Okay. eBay. Whole new economy. What? Facebook, YouTube. What one? Google. You're naming a lot of them, and the good ones, Google, eBay, just tons of them. But these things, DoubleClick invented the internet advertising business. Just some fantastic things. Let's talk about Google real quickly. We don't have much time. I'm going to fly through this. Let's compare Google to Microsoft at the 10-year mark. It's interesting to take a look at it. Microsoft is perhaps one of the greatest, if not the greatest, business success stories of all time. Maybe rivaled by the oil industry, the auto industry, but certainly it's right up there. It's created a tremendous amount of wealth and has impacted society greatly. But let's take a look at Google and what it's done. First of all, it's just becoming dominant. Matter of fact, let's take a look. Who has used Google in the last 24 hours? Raise your hand. I want everybody to look around the room for a second. Okay, that's pretty amazing. Matter of fact, I wish I could start a company and that could happen like that. That's pretty tremendous. The only thing other than that I could maybe get everybody raise their hands would be maybe water. Who's drank water in the last 24 hours? Okay, there. Okay, well, you're not raising your hands. All right. So, unless you're fasting, I guess. All right. So, let's look at this. Some comparisons. Microsoft, 33 years old in September of last year when Google turned 10 years old. And that means 10 years from when the 2 college students went down to the county office and said, okay, we're going to start a company, Google Incorporated. Google, what a dumb name. Stamp, here's your form, right? Okay, and they started their company. 10 years later, what do they look like? Well, the last 4 quarters, Microsoft $60.4 billion, Google $19.6 billion in revenue. Revenue at age 10, though. Go back and look, where was Microsoft at the same? 140 million revenue, adjusted for inflation, 279 million. So you're looking at 279 million versus 19.6 billion at the 10-year mark for those 2 companies. Would you say Google's doing pretty well? Okay, let's skip down. You can look at all these. Look at the searches numbers. This is what's scaring the boys in Redmond. Okay, searches in July of 2008, 1 month of searches. Microsoft has spent hundreds of millions, if not billions, trying to catch up to Google, and they're at 2.3 billion. Google's at 48.7 billion.
What do you mean searches?
Searches at their search engine. MSN Search versus Google. Anybody ever been to MSN Search? Who's used MSN Search in the last 24 hours? Look around. Do you think that concerns Steve Ballmer? You know who Steve Ballmer is? CEO of Microsoft? You should. Okay? All right? Searches per hour. It's pretty amazing. The common thread, Google's just an amazing story. It's probably the most powerful company in the history of the world in terms of affecting human behavior. Where we shop, how we think, where we get information, where we do our research for travel, where you go and get information for your term papers and copy, paste. No, you don't do that. Okay? So these things are powerful. These companies have as a common thread running through them this networking of databases. And that's a common thread of success. Now, I've only got about 1 or 2 minutes with you, but I want to share with you that the models have really changed in the software business. It's more profitable, more lucrative than ever before to do software because the costs have changed. It used to be that you had to have a salesman go out and sell a company. A piece of software was expensive. They'd install it on the computer. There were customer service issues, all these things. How is software done now? As a service. I said SaaS, software as a service early on. Right now, you can create a software as a service. As long as it works through the browser, you're going to have a lot less crashes, a lot less problems with people's computers. You can distribute it instantly. If you fix a bug, it's fixed across your entire customer base. The margins are higher because you're not having to package and distribute disks or do anything to get the thing downloaded and installed. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. It's getting better. And Time recognized this fundamental shift to where the shift is this, the power, and if you can give me just 1 more minute, the power is now in the consumer, in the user. And they rewarded and called the person of the year a couple years ago was you, the consumer, because the internet is shifting a lot of things going on. And let me just go to the last 4 slides I have here, and I'm going to share with you a couple things. Right here is showing how people are getting their news and their information. It's shifting, and it's really scaring a lot of people. Scaring the old guard. Because blogs, people's personal journals, how they write their critiques of a hotel they stayed at, all this is affecting things more than advertising, more than old media. And it's shifting things. Matter of fact, there's a lot of interesting things happening. Who's from Seattle area? Anybody here? That's where I'm from. You know the Seattle PI? You know what they announced a few days ago? They're stopping their paper. They can't afford to print it anymore. You're going to see that happen. Here in Utah County, Provo Herald says we can't print the classified section anymore. Craigslist. They didn't say Craigslist, but we know it's Craigslist and KSL.com, don't we? Right? They can't afford to print it every day. They have to print only on certain days. This is all changing. So let me just end on this. I wish I was your age right now because there's more opportunity in tech entrepreneurship than there ever was in my day. I came out of school 25 years ago and had a lot of success focusing on tech and the things that happen with the advent of the internet age. But as Kevin Rollins, the namesake of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology here at BYU says, the internet hasn't affected us even 5% of what it will affect us. There's so much more opportunity for you. Even in this economy that we're facing right now in the United States and worldwide, there is so much opportunity in this field, in this area. Here's some of the hot places where you college students should be focusing on. In Facebook applications, including all the social network applications. They've all opened up their platforms to build applications. iPhone applications, the new Google Android phones and their applications. There's people right now in this university, and why shouldn't it be you, building companies, making services, doing things that hopefully will just be the next great big thing. And right here, there's no reason at BYU we can't be just like Stanford and the next Google or YouTube coming out of BYU from students that create great companies. All right, thanks for your time.